Oh, wow. Remember how Jesus was saying in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21, peppering in some details in this preliminary setup before the tribulation starts? He was talking about how there would be, uh, you would hear of wars and rumors of wars. And we talked about, many different applications for that with the psychological war, this lie that's being used to refashion the earth into this new world, you know what, and all that kind of stuff. And the war on humanity. We've done a lot of videos talking about that. Well, another layer to it that we're seeing is this really interesting phenomena here, dislodging China from North Africa, confrontation drumbeats. If you have followed in the past, China gave a huge loan to certain countries in Africa. And then when those countries couldn't pay it back, China was like, oh, okay, well, we'll just come in because this is ours now. Which, when I had ever heard that, I was like, oh, wow, that's harsh. And it ever got me thinking about that whole Tom Hanks video that we talk about all the time, that once in a lifetime cover that the Talking Heads did. Well, Tom Hanks did a cover for it for his hologram for the king. And when the loan sharks popped up in this huge expanse of the ocean that completely fills the earth and it's this worthless paper dollar scenario, I started thinking about how this is how China operates, that they're willing as communists to lend all these billions of dollars to countries such as ours and other nations, knowing that there's probably no chance we're ever going to pay them back. And they just come in upon default and take everything. That's how they are. And your government willingly and lovingly uh, got into that agreement with them, and they never said what the collateral was. And so they can just come in here, man, and own everything if they want to. So I was ever thinking about that. And the other thing to consider too is when I was over at Breaking Israel News. I don't know if I'll be able to find it fast enough, but here it is. I was seeing how Kim, their names are so hard to say. Kim Jong Un reappears as North Korea opens fire on South Korea. Like, are you serious? Are you crazy? What is your damage? They always have to be, starting some kind of problem, picking and picking and picking. And James, he talked about this. He says, the reason why you do evil is because you succumb to these passions and desires, and you act it out through the sinful nature, basically. And so let's look at this article first. So if you didn't know, they were asking the question, did he die in surgery? Did he go into hiding? Is he alive? Is he dead? Well, as it turns out, obviously, homeboy is alive. And he is being a total whatever to his neighbor to the south. It's like, really? Can't you just leave them alone? Yeah, that could be. But I would love to see pictures. But anyhow, having to take whatever at its face value because I don't have any other information to go off of. Did they seriously twist this barbed wire into a heart shape? Is that on purpose? That's weird. Anyhow, of course, good old Bible has to tool scripture, and they put in the Psalm 16:10, for you will not abandon me to Sheol or let your faithful one see the pit. Korea demilitarized zone flag of South Korea country board. North and South Korea soldiers exchanged fire along the border on Sunday, reports 7 News. The South Korean military blamed North Korean soldiers for targeting their guard post in the DMZ. I don't know what that is. The Joint Chief of Staff in South Korea said in a statement that their neighbors to the north fired several bullets at the South Korean guard post inside the densely fortified border. South Korea responded by firing 2 rounds after issuing a warning broadcast, it reported. No injuries were reported. I think they made a little mistake there. That's okay. The UN command said that they would investigate whether or not an, I don't know what this is, armistice violation took place during the provocation. This event came just hours after it was reported that the North Korean dictator Yoon was indeed alive and well, following rumors of being brain dead or even deceased. Oh, good grief. Can somebody just please make him be quiet? U.S. President Trump said that he was glad to see the North Korean tyrant was alive and kicking, taking to Twitter saying, I, for one, am glad to see he's back and well. Why? Are you good friends or something? Do you, like, have the same Masonic lodge you communicate at or something? This is a man that takes great pleasure in harming and torturing others. You're happy that he's alive and well? Like, why would you even say that? There's something so wrong with that man, besides him being orange. On Friday, China, who is North Korea's closest ally, boasted that they evicted U.S. naval warships from the South China Sea, whom they called provocative. There is just so much distraction and silliness and game playing and whatever going on. It's like they have to provide a show in the midst of this destabilization of everything. Okay, so let's go back and find out what's going on. And I don't necessarily know if I agree with everything that Adapt 2030 says, but that's okay. I don't have to agree with everything that he says. But I do want to hear what's going on with China being forced out in Africa.
Good afternoon, everyone. You want to guess where this place is right here? Good afternoon, everyone.
Ooh.
You want to guess where this place is right here?
Ooh.
Yemen, one of the driest places on the planet. 3.5 years worth of rain in 24 hours. That area in the Middle East is becoming a new grow zone. Because looking back in history, the Marib Dam of ancient accolades in how it irrigated to the verdant milk and honey valleys in Yemen. Areas here in green are the new grow zones emerging. Chinese are there, all the investment projects. They scoped out where the mega lakes and all the different drainage basins were over the last 4,000 years. Looking into planetary matchups from 79 AD to 2024, you know something's on the horizon. Governments know exactly what this is. Global liquefaction event. Australia, coldest start to May ever recorded. Victoria. These are the areas I chose on the map and
In
pointed out
May?
that lose crop production back in 2017. Bullseye. So how do you think we're going to dislodge the Chinese from North Africa?
Okay, wait. In May? Because a month later it's June, and like June 21st is always the start of summer. See, they try to play stupid, like they're not using technology and incredibly brilliant people that are evil to play around with the weather, and then they hide it in stupid movies. But they know exactly what's going on. They either act like they don't know anything and everything gets put into the sea of ambiguity, nobody knows anything, or they play it off where, you know, they act like they're incompetent depending upon what the topic is. And these are the tools that they use to always put this facade and this mask on, and then they go and they do whatever it is they want to do, and you're none the wiser because you just think of the governments of the world as either morons that don't know anything or incompetence. But in all reality, they're incredibly intelligent, they're brilliant, they use people that have the technological know-how, and they convene all this torture on the planet where they, since 2019 and 2020, so much of the land is so waterlogged that you can't get a good wheat harvest, which is a big problem because the seeds don't like water. They don't like to be in a constant state of wet. And it's kind of, an art and science, if you will, when you grow food. And these farmers that have to strike a balance with, nature, I guess you will, to grow certain things, there is a recipe for the conditions that they need. And so, you can go back into history and think about all the pagan cultures that have, had to sacrifice this and do that and do little dances and do blood sacrifices and all this stuff to what they assume are the spirits that they worship to get, it's witchcraft. To do A, I expect to manipulate and get B out of it. And so a lot of times it was for the purposes of a good harvest. Whereas when you study the relationship with God and his nation, the as above, so below nation in the Old Testament, they had a good relationship, and Yahweh was a good provider. In fact, his name, one of his names, he has lots of names, but one of his names is Jehovah Jireh, the provider. And so much more could be said about that, but you really look at the difference between the integrity and the character and nature of who God is and how he provided all of this, flourishing seed and agricultural blessing to his people. And it was all correlated to this whole system of feasts and the sun and the moon and the stars and the planting of things. It was all choreographed. I mean, you would learn this stuff from your father and they from them and so on and so forth. And their religious observances were even built in with the agricultural cycles. I mean, it's a rich study if you ever take the time to go over it. Certain things were planted at certain times. I mean, the whole thing was this beautiful dance between God Almighty and mankind. And of course, well, God was always faithful, kind, and just, and loving and good. Mankind always had to do what mankind does, which is, be all bullheaded and not follow directions. But now you have a different scenario at play. You have the technological math heads that have the science down, and they literally are able to mess with the internal system of the natural sciences and influence through their technology, bringing about all kinds of different types of weather systems and destructive, over the top type of results that directly impact the growing, or they'll send a tornado through. If you don't believe that, there's not much I can do. I can't believe everything for you, but if you study DARPA and you study HARP and you just study that, the way that the military industrial complex works, it's always about gaining advantage over your enemy, and we're the enemy of our government. I don't know if you know that or not. And so it makes perfect sense that they're able to screw around with weather and influence and impact our everything. This is just what they do. Now, this guy would say it's due to a cycle of the sun, which is fine. He can say or believe whatever he wants. I really don't care. But I would tell you that there is much more of a dedicated hand of destruction behind it all, where, again, they just act stupid or they act incompetent or what, like, oh, we don't know. No, they know. They totally know. But anyhow, I want to hear what's kicking here with China and North Africa.
It's very apparent now our global food production is in dire straits. And how do you think the governments of the world already know this grand solar minimum is going to cause these events are handling it right now? They're locking you down so you can't move to better grow zones. It's already in play. Governments across the planet know what's happening. And this is the reason. Perhaps it's not a little bug. Perhaps it's such a giant thing such as the sun on a 400 or 2,000 year cycle. With the majority of the world's workforce working from home, a useful tool to protect yourself and scramble your computer's identity.
VPN.
From my initial
VPN. I don't care.
And from the years of research that I've done, the way this works is as these four gas giants line up in the same quadrant out in our solar system, along with our sun going into this decreased activity state, it's going to create massive electrical effects on our planet and the possibility of something called a global liquefaction event.
What's that?
Where mud and water just simply ooze out of the earth.
What?
And we're already seeing the above ground precipitation with the extremes in the 500-year range now. So common that it is the common. This does match up with 79 AD, and that would be the Vesuvius eruption, but I encourage you to go to Solar System Scope. Even when you go back to version 1, what I noticed, though, they cut out these older timelines where you can only go back 100 years or so back to 1899. I'm so glad I got all this screen grabbed when I was doing the research several years ago before they stopped the reversal in time. I wonder what they're trying to hide.
Everything.
This right here is what they're trying to hide. Areas in green are the countries that are coming online. And you say, well, that's the Middle East and North Africa. It's so dry there, isn't it? Well, it had been for millennia.
Okay, wait a minute. Okay, study this with me. Oh, man. This is going to make me ill. Okay, ready? This is so painful. Okay, offline first, meaning, oh my, the West and the North, oh my, they're gonna starve you out. You know, when you watch Justin Bieber and Ed Sheeran's video, we've talked about this before. It's called I Don't Care. Isn't that precious? I Don't Care. In it, it is filled with them dancing and laughing at you. They're dressed up as everything from unicorns to boy girls to, well, they use the green screen a lot, to dancing ice cream cones to dancing cowboys. Remember, the Antichrist is coming on horseback, and the symbology of speed of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. So you'll see a cowboy everywhere. I have so many videos. If you just go delve back into my channel for kicks and go find all of my cowboy videos. I didn't even think that stuff was cool anymore, but they're bringing it up to welcome and throw it in your face and laugh at you because they're Masons. That the coming wooden cowboy is coming. The Antichrist is coming. The natural man is coming. That abominable branch, that liar, that AI enhanced evil tribe of Dan dictator from the as above so below nation is coming. He's coming. And so anyhow, long story short, they're going to starve you out because they can't impact the weather. I don't think he knows that or not. Let's see here. So the southern part of Africa, and I don't know what these nations are because I can't read with the red over it. And I don't have all the geography memorized. I'll have to go get my globe if I have the energy. Uh-oh, Australia, you're not in very good shape. Now, what's interesting is here's our little friend New Zealand, where you have all the rotten Masonic Hollywood elite going to hide underground like little girls. Sorry, trying to be nice, but it's hard. China's not doing too hot. Russia's not doing too. So you could see China, getting together with parts of Africa and saying, we'll give you this, knowing they can't repay it. And then, oh, that's ours. We'll take that. That is some strategy. I'll give you points for strategy of evil. And, oh no, our European friends up here. I seriously need to get my globe. I can't quite see. But anyhow, you really see how, look at this. So the new grow zones emerging. Wow. And it's all in the Middle East here. Not all of them, though. That's interesting. What's kicking with the Saudi Arabia, I don't know. Where is Egypt? Here it is, Egypt. So you're probably not even going to be able to find it on here. The as above, so below nation, which I think is right there. It's so teeny tiny you can't even find it. Anyhow, yellow is expanding the production. So Ukraine, Venezuela, parts of Indonesia. Is this Pakistan here? I can't even see it. No, wait, that's Pakistan. That's India. Well, who are you? Or is this Myanmar? I don't know. I can't see it. Offline 5 to 10 years after red are the blue. So good portions of South America, India, Kazakhstan, and I can't read any of that and don't have it all memorized. Is this Papua New Guinea? There's Sri Lanka. Anyhow, let's hear how bad this is going to be.
But now, the Fertile Crescent. These rain patterns are returning, rivers are starting to run again, lakes are refilling.
No, really. Keep telling me.
And guess who's there? Chinese. They knew the cycle. And you might ask and say, well, you're just guessing at all of this. Let's take a look over here on the watchers. Now, this is just from the last 1 week of news in terms of weather, what's happening in the Middle East here and North Africa. Djibouti, 6 months worth of rain in a few hours. That's in Eastern Africa.
Wow.
Severe flooding for the 4th year in a row in Afghanistan, rivers running after 2,000 to 2,500 years, where so many things had been abandoned out in the desert. Those same rivers are running again with this massive hailstorm ripping through and destroying crops in Pakistan.
Oh, no.
The intense rain and the sideways sheeting 70-mile-per-hour rainstorm and deluge in Qatar. Heavy rains triggering massive floods. Najran in Saudi Arabia. And take a look at this bottom entry here. Aden, that image I'm going to white out for you, is the floods in one of the driest places on the planet.
Wow.
And then Morocco, again, magically more rain, crop production increases. Ethiopia, Somalia, massive floods again, crop increases.
Wow.
And then Czech Republic going into their 500-year drought. I did a video years ago about Elbe River and the drought stones. See, these are all signs of a much longer, heavier, more powerful cycle at our doorstep, already in play. Do you think all these things happening across our world are just random happenstance, how the economy was destroyed without an inkling of thought, how everybody's been locked down? This is all what they're going to have to do to try to control masses that are going to flee to warmer areas, areas that have better food production, and areas that offer cheaper food. As we start to march through the summer and into the next couple of years here, it's going to get really expensive food. If you have the means to move, you're going to want to. Well, you can't have 2 billion people moving to another place within a year. That's going to upset the balance of everything, especially when people withdraw their funds from 401ks and then you set up in a new area, the disassociation of wealth. There's going to be huge gaps in areas that people are going to run to, Indonesia, equatorial band countries. And photo of the week definitely has to be this, Aden in Yemen. And you look and you say, well, that is a massive river in the middle of the town there, is it not? There's not even a river there. That just formed from all the flash flooding and the amount of rain that had come down. Before my channel, we used to get 6 months worth of rain in a day, and that was startling. And then it was a year's worth of rain in a day. And I made the forecast that we would start to see a decade of rain in a single day.
Wow.
Here we are getting into that range of 3.5 years worth of rain in a day. In Yemen, of all places, it makes no sense that it's one of the driest places on the planet unless there's massive shifts going on. And we can clearly see that there are new monsoon patterns that are setting up through this area here. Now, it's been the 4th year in a row that they've received massive rain. So as I'm starting to look for these cycles, it has to occur at least 3 years in a row. Then you can start to forecast out for the 4th year moving forward.
Your camel's drowning.
And the submerged cars in Yemen as well. Now, this is across a vast swath of the coastal area. It wasn't just Aden. There were other towns and cities. Obviously, there's been so much destroyed there that you would expect drainage and infrastructure not to be working correctly. I know that place has gotten a raw deal in so many ways, shapes, and form. But it's going to be a new emerging grow zone, so people are going to want to step in there and grab it, cause problems, destroy things, and then rebuild it.
Wow.
And then right on cue, the cessation of hostilities. How convenient right now. The rains have returned. I wonder what we'll offer. Farming equipment? Are we going to rebuild some of the dams? Are we going to put irrigation canals in there again? Are we going to rebuild the roads? This is what it's all about, capturing new food grow zones, destabilizing them prior, and then taking them or try to offer help and assistance to get a foothold in the new areas that are going to grow crops on the planet. This is a perfect example. And then looking at Qatar, they had 70 mile an hour per wind, sheeting, blowing rain. I've linked everything in the description box below. I hope you go check out videos and these articles. That I watched this and I thought that is the middle of a hurricane, not the middle of a desert. And so many things were destroyed with the winds and the rain that it made a lot of news there as well. It was completely out of the normal to see sideways blowing sheets of rain like you would see in any regular hurricane or typhoon across the planet. And I've done this slide here in a previous presentation at Alternative View 10.1 in London last year, talking about these same areas are going to shift in the precipitation, and because of that, we'll be able to grow crops there where we could not now, especially using underground water resources from Libya to be able to irrigate other areas of North Africa, along with the increasing rainfall. Now,
Something to consider and look into is the Silk Road Initiative. And it's almost like these people had some awareness of what was coming. That would make a lot of sense in terms of if they're the ones that are orchestrating this with their different weaponry and whatnot, that dear Lockheed Martin and others have created for them. And, what you can see over here in the West, Canada and America, is just a ton of Halliburton, Dick Cheney type of funded FEMA camps just everywhere. All these creepidocious people capturing sites, and they act like, oh, we don't know anything about it. And then a few years ago, Jesse Ventura had this show, and they were looking at them and trying to get some answers. We got to get some answers from these senators everywhere who didn't know anything. It's almost like they flag it out in front of you, dismiss it, and then, like nothing to see here, move on. And yet they're still there. They're still a problem and they're still there. But anyhow, you have this whole concentration of the fourth industrial revolution taking place over in, the Middle East, and this whole relationship with the as above, so below nation, China, all these Middle Eastern countries, this huge transit system, bullet train, whatever you want to call it. And, the ghost cities that people have talked about over in Japan, and many other things could be said about it. But over here, you just see the setup for the total celebration of death and this debt that is just being racked up that is outrageous. You can really see where this is going. And he kind of adds another layer onto this, showing you that this really is about taking over these areas where it looks like it's going to end up being fertile ground for growing food. And, people a long time ago wondered how could it be that in America there would be a coming time of famine? They would read that in the Bible in the third seal in Revelation 6 and wonder, how is there going to be global famine? Well, you're seeing how the technology is being used and abused, and whatever else is going on with the earth. I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure what they're doing to mess with things. They ought not to have these CERNs and these different things to fiddle around with, messing with God's good creation. But anyhow, you can kind of just put it all together and see where it's going, how you're setting up, how it's coming.
this is over multi-millennial patterns here, but it seems we are definitely into the shift. Now, if this is a heavier, more powerful cycle, as many people believe, then this shift is going to happen far faster than the quote-unquote experts say it could. If we're going to repeat something in the, say, 3,600 year cycle range, this would onset so fast that it would bring us right back to the 4,000 years ago when they're talking about catfish in the lakes across all of North Africa, inland deltas and estuaries filling up, rivers running all the way to the Atlantic Ocean and also into the Mediterranean. And I think the timelines that we've been taught on how fast our climate can shift, we know that a full ice age can onset in 10 years. So why could not a new 3,600-year rain pattern onset in less than a decade as well? Because that is apparently what is happening right now. And great kingdoms rarely go into the night. That is so true. How many civilizations have we seen disappear through the Middle East, the Fertile Crescent, all the way over to Afghanistan and into Pakistan, all through Northern Africa? Great civilizations of their time just totally magically disappeared. They ran out of water. Now, speaking of water, this is the most amazing find here, the Marib Dam. See how tall those walls are?
Mm-hmm.
That was the wall to stop the water. That used to be a dam in the desert because so much rainfall came down, the rivers drained into that. This is a computer rendition of what it used to look like. And as you can see also, the fields that were irrigated by this water that was caught in that dam. Now, it's not a coincidence that this area is getting wet and there have been so much interest in it militarily over the last 7 years. The same powers that you hear the names repeating in the news again and again to go take over places. Not really the oil this time, it's more about the water and the food. And you're going to start to see this same repeating pattern here. So I'm going to talk about China and the North African grow zones. They are going to need to be dislodged out of there, period. So how's that going to happen? First of all, if you look at this chart here, this is 4,000 years ago to 6,000 years ago in North Africa. The plus signs there are where huge lakes had formed and riverbeds at that time prior, where there was standing water in lakes, estuaries, and it's really well marked out.
Wow.
If you look at where the Chinese North African investment projects are, you'll see that overlays with a really good percentage of correlation. Now, the Chinese are up in North Africa, so they have first claim to it. It's like they stuck their flag in the sand up there. They put in billions and billions into the economy, as well as infrastructure, got the rail lines, roads, hospitals, cities, and then we want to come along and grab that same space. So how's that going to work? It's not, unless something else happens. This is why you see the beating drums across the planet of conflict. If you did two front on a conflict, China would have to leave North Africa. There'd be no resupply up there either. So it'd be rather easy to cut it off, especially if we controlled, and I'm turning the Western powers, controlled Aden. And maybe that's the reason that there's been so much conflict there is forward staging base to control Aden Fort and that whole tip there, because you could block off the Red Sea so easily. No food in or out, no resupply in or out for the Chinese. So everybody on the planet wants this grow zone now. It's going to be very apparent moving forward. The news feed is going to be about how bad they are, how bad we are, how bad everybody is, and then it's all going to be focused on the conflict in North Africa. And if you could do it halfway around the world and do it by boat, cut off part of the supply chains and supply lines, definitely going to cause a problem over there. Somebody's going to have to leave. Which brings me to my next point here. Where are the Chinese also? Oh, Northern Australia. They're buying up vast amounts of tracts of land to raise cattle, but there's no water until the rain cycle repeats like it is now, and then they're going to get an enormous amount of water. And those riverbeds up in Northern Australia are starting to flow after centuries as well. It's quirky how everybody knows the cycles except us. It's CO2, isn't it? Nothing to do with the sun or our position in the galaxy or on the spiral arm or above and below the ecliptic. That has nothing to do with it. It's just got to be CO2. And when I showed you on that map earlier about Victoria, here we go, Melbourne. Huge changes in the climate. Wettest ever recorded. Broke the record all the way back to 1924 as the wettest first 4 months of any year ever. Now, I know they didn't go back into, say, the 1600s or 1500s or 2,000 years ago because the record keeping was strictly based on English measurements that arrived at the time. I'd love to go back and find something 7,000 years ago and see what this was like and then compare it to today.
There wasn't 7,000 years ago.
Back over to the watchers. Records tumble as cold blast sweeps Australia. I was told it was the warmest year ever. Nothing would ever happen, and everybody was across the comments board. You are off your rocker for saying that Australia is going to get cold and we're going to lose crops down here. The country imports wheat because they can't grow enough, and now we got these super early blizzards here. At what point do people go, Wonder if maybe I should look a little more into that information because the CO2 models didn't really predict anything that came true so far, but it seems that the solar models, the solar variability, and solar cycles in time seem to pin it perfectly. This goes right into the rain records as well, and those areas in the red circles is where we're going to reference on this map here. So how much was it a record blast of cold? Well, Victoria, coldest May ever starting. So again, that only takes us back to, several hundred years of time, not thousands of years. But getting up to 2 feet of snow this early in the season is unprecedented. Truly it is. The ski resorts are all just up and jumping for joy on how much snow has arrived so early as they go into winter in the southern hemisphere. And I noticed reading through the article here, you really had to dig into several news reports before they started to say the coldest ever. A lot of times they would just say it was cold. And they were expecting all these cold, but they never would say the record cold. You had to dig for that. I'm glad the Watchers put it together by compiling several articles because the narrative is totally busted now. They're going to need to explain to people what has happened, but they won't. So this whole thing that's happening now, locking down the planet, the economy, have you noticed global warming and CO2 has just disappeared into the dust in the back? Nobody's asking, nobody's talking. And here we are, cold and excessive rains. Everywhere you look across the planet, it's always the 1 to 500 year storm is the new norm. It's coming right now. The crop losses are going to intensify. And now
Yeah.
that they're doing field tours virtually, what I saw with the USDA and also the Wheat Associates, how much room is there for fraud in that to give us a false, again, number on how much grain is going into the silos? It's all going to be virtual. I talk about all this in the book I wrote, Climate Revolution, along with my co-author, Bill Porter. It's about the cycles in the sun. They're predictable. We know they affect society. They affect society in 3 different ways. It's a fingerprint of the grand solar minimum. Crop losses that drive skyrocketing food prices. There's not enough food in some areas. People migrate, so mass migration is part of it. And then social instability as governments really have a difficult time keeping things in check when there's massive inflation, food shortages, and let them eat cake comes to mind every single time. And then the last half of the book is all about the solutions. What are we going to do about this? Well, we're going to have to revamp agriculture as we know it. You're going to have to grow your own food around you in your neighborhoods, your house, personally.
Well, yeah, until your military comes charging in with their big giant boots and, you know, kill stomps your garden. You have some very not nice people that have a goal, and I don't think people understand this. The goal is to make you die. Anyhow, well, that was pretty interesting. Do your research on the Silk Road Initiative and how America and the West are not on that map. They have plans for you. Anyhow, thank you. God bless.